Hello, people from around the universe! I am your host, Yatayan Ace, and welcome back to another one of my videos on Fairy Tail's 100 Years Quest. And today, we're going to be discussing volumes 4 through 6. And just like last time, this video will be split into two parts. One, that will be a general review, going over my thoughts and feelings for these current volumes, and a second part that will be full of spoilers, and that is because I will go over key details and moments from these volumes. So I can't really do that without going into spoilers. But hopefully, this way, there's something in this video for everyone, as I more than understand not wanting to be spoiled before the anime comes out. And if that's the case, that's totally fine. You can just watch the first part of the video, and then maybe come back to this when you're caught up with either the anime or manga. Regardless, it's gonna be a fun time, especially as the arc is really starting to pick up some steam now, and I just can't wait to talk about this with all of you. But of course, before we get into any of that, cue my intro. So, if you haven't watched my review of volumes 1, 2, 3, then I guess it actually doesn't matter for this part of the video because there's no spoilers, so there's no real continuity to be had. But go watch that video anyway. Cool? Cool. But let's get into the actual review for these new volumes. And I think it's good to start it off with a general idea of the goals our characters are trying to accomplish. Of course, the most obvious goal is completing the 100 Years Quest. This is not a spoiler because one, I'm not telling you what the quest is, and two, it's the name of the arc. But there's also a secondary plot line that I alluded to in my review of volumes 1 through 3, if you remember. And while it was very much separate from the main story for most of those volumes, that's not the case here. In fact, I'd say by the end of volume 6, it has become fully integrated with the main storyline. And while I do think that this plotline really only starts to shine as a really cool and captivating concept later, particularly volume 8, it's already starting to show some promise here, which was kind of missing in the first 3 volumes. Plus, in volumes 4 through 6, I'm actually starting to consider this a new concept as opposed to the way I was taking it in the first volumes, which was just a rehash of Zeref, but with a less interesting antagonist. But let's put that aside for a second and go back to the main plotline, which is only becoming more interesting as the arc goes on. Already last time, they completed the first of the 5 objectives they had for the 100 Years Quest, which, again, I won't tell you what they are because it's spoiler-free. And now they're heading off to complete the second one. And honestly, this second one has a lot more at stake than the first one for various reasons. But the main reason is that the antagonist here is a lot more of an actual antagonist as opposed to just someone that they have to stop in some way and might not even be that bad of a guy, but just because of circumstances is someone that opposes Fairy Tail. I'm not going to say anything else because, again, I don't want to spoil anything if I can. But at the same time, I can't very well just tell you, oh, thing A happened at place B at time X, and then just give you my opinion of the arc, because that's not very interesting. Or maybe it is. If you want to see that, then let me know. I'll make a separate video where all I say is random generic words that could describe literally anything and just give you a rating out of 10 for that part of the arc. Anyway, because of the antagonist being, I don't even want to say a full-on villain yet, but definitely more along those lines than just someone that they have to fight for the quest. This is starting to have some more weight behind it, at least from a narrative perspective, because you really do feel like they have more to lose. Again, it's hard to say more without spoiling something, but just take my word and trust me when I say that having an actual antagonist does make it feel like the heroes have more to fight for than they did in the first part. And I don't even want to say that in a bad way, because I really enjoyed the first 3 volumes, and if we're talking about purely the character of the antagonist, I prefer the first one over the second one. But when we talk about the actual nature of the antagonist, I just think that for this type of plot line, a real antagonist that is bordering on being a full-on villain works better than one that is, I don't know how to say this without spoiling anything, more of a rival? No. I guess just less of a villain is the best way I can put it, which, I mean, sounds a little odd to say, but really, it does kind of fit the first antagonist's character. He's just less of a villain than the other ones. And I think it's also important to say this because I don't want people to get the idea that the first guy has never done anything bad ever and is just the greatest person on earth. So, less of a villain I guess works fine. But moving on, there is also a secondary now that the two storylines have merged together, plot line that is going on at the same time. And this was actually already started in the first 3 volumes. And it has to do with a new guild that they run into while on this new continent. If you want to learn more about them, then I actually have a video where I do a full-on analysis of this guild up on the channel right now. And I would just caution you that it's all spoilers. So if you're okay with that, because you've already read about them, or because you're fine with being spoiled before the anime comes out, then by all means go watch it. I think it's another pretty fun video, but just so you know, there's no spoiler-free section there, so just be careful, okay? Anyway, this guild has more of a role to play in these volumes than in the first 3, but even then, it still feels almost completely separate from the rest of the storyline, which is why I decided to make just a separate video for them, because there's no real easy way to fit them in without spoiling everything. So again, if you want to find out more about them, you know where to look. One more thing I want to mention is that the second objective they're currently taking on doesn't get fully accomplished until the later volumes, because while I'm pretty sure they started taking on the second antagonist by the end of volume 6, could be a bit earlier, but I think it's the end of volume 6, and that doesn't get fully resolved until volume 7. So what that means for us and these videos is that I'll probably have some overlap between this review and then the one covering volume 7 through 9, but that will also mostly be for the spoiler section. And I guess I just wanted to mention that it's not just so simple as, 3 volumes occur, there's an objective, they complete the objective, they move on to the next 3 volumes, rinse and repeat. Because, of course, the story is getting more intricate, so it's not just the same thing over and over. Which is good, because would you really want to read or watch the same thing over and over for 5 times? I mean, with Fairy Tail characters, maybe, but still, it's good that they are differentiating things a bit. But that is it for the spoiler-free review section, and before we end this, I think it's a good idea to do what I did last time and rank this arc compared to other Fairy Tail's arc that we all know and love. So I think after volumes 4 through 6, the arc has climbed just a little bit for me, and it is now above Phantom Lord. And my main reasoning behind it is that while I think Phantom Lord might still have some moments that are just more hype than anything we've had so far in the arc, this arc has started to accumulate a couple really cool moments in these last 3 volumes. And when you combine that with the fact that the plotline overall I think is more interesting than the one for Phantom Lord, which is very character driven, but in terms of the plot is a very simple guild versus guild plotline, I think this earns the 100 Years Quest so far a place slightly above the Phantom Lord arc, which honestly is pretty impressive because I love that arc, and I'm sure all of you do as well. So when I'm putting it above it, they must be doing something right. Still, it hasn't quite reached those heights of something like the Tournament arc or the Tower of Heaven arc, which to me are kind of the epitome of Fairy Tail. Not just those two, but like that level of arc. But, you know, it's getting there. And maybe when I talk to you again next time, it will be there. Who knows? I guess if you've read this, you do know, but you still don't know what I think about it. So in a way, you also still don't know. You know? But now, it's time for the spoiler section of the video. And this is my warning to all of you that if you don't want to be spoiled on the 100 Years Quest, then either click off this video and come back to it after you've caught up with the manga, or click off this video and come back to it after you've watched the anime. Or I guess you can not come back to it, but like, what's the fun in that? Anyway, let's get to the key moments and details of these volumes. First off, the White Mage. As I was saying before, both her and her storyline have become a lot more interesting than they were in the first 3 volumes. I think the main reason behind that is that, again, she doesn't feel like a Zeref clone anymore, but a distinct character. But also, with her having taken over all of Fairy Tail, except for the people that are around in 100 Years Quest, those are pretty high stakes. I mean, yes, we knew about this in Volume 3, but we're seeing the full effects of this now, and it is jarring to just see so many usually strong and colorful personalities kind of just meekly obey anything that the White Mage says. However, this does bring up some very cool moments, the coolest of which has to be Erza versus Laxus. And even though, yes, Erza does lose, and as an Erza fan, my heart broke a little bit, I then remember that it is against Laxus, who is also one of the best characters in Fairy Tail, and definitely no slouch when it comes to combat. So honestly, I just enjoyed the fight because it's 2 of Fairy Tail's strongest wizards just fully going at each other, and you don't really get to see that a lot. So that was pretty fantastic. Seriously, I think that fight, when it gets animated, might become one of the best in all of Fairy Tail, but I don't want to jinx it, so let's wait for the anime to do its adaptation of it. But it definitely has potential, let me tell you that much. I mean, both of them are using some insane techniques in this fight, including Laxus' new Red Lightning Dragon mode, which, what? Why is that so cool when the name just sounds like a very lazy attempt of giving him a power-up? Like seriously, you hear Red Lightning Dragon, and the first thing that came to my mind is like, oh, okay, it's going to be like Super Saiyan Blue and Dragon Ball Super, where it's just kind of boring. But then because it's Laxus, it just works. I mean, I don't know. This man can make anything cool, and I'm all here for it, honestly. There's also the weird moment where Kiria sees Laxus and then falls in love. But to her, that means that she wants to consume him, so I don't know. Again, the Diablos Guild is super weird, and except for maybe Suzaku, although we have to see more of him, I hate all of them. I don't mean I hate them as characters in the story. I mean, I just hate their character. So I think that they're good to have in the story because they bring up some very interesting conflicts, but I still hate them personality-wise. Can't wait to get that one person that's like, oh, I love the Diabolos Guild. Why are you making fun of them? They are the best ever. Look, if that's you, I'm glad you're enjoying them. To each their own, but I am sorry to be the one to break this to you. You are objectively and factually incorrect in your opinion. But honestly, that takes some skill because opinions are always subjective. So to be objectively wrong on that, bravo. Okay, but what about the other key moments? Well, for one, we find out that Toka and the White Mage are separate personalities. And in fact, the White Mage isn't even called the White Mage, but we don't know her name yet, so I'm not going to spoil that. But yeah, we find out that this is just two separate people, or I guess a person and an Exceed, which is also interesting that there's another Exceed. At this point, we don't know how there's another one that our characters don't know about, but we do find out in the future, and the explanation is pretty fascinating. There's also like a hilarious moment. There's also a hilarious moment that stretches out for, I want to say, almost 2 full manga volumes. I could be wrong on that, but I think so. And that is Jalal interacting with Erza while under the control of the White Mage. And for anyone wondering what I mean by that, he is literally just not even coming on to her. He's just very overtly suggesting that they engage in intimate relationships to the point that after the battle with Luxus, he saves her, runs away with her, and then is just in his underwear and is completely okay with Erza just tying him down because he's like, ah, yes, this must be what she's into, so that's no problem for me. Again, I can't stop laughing about it because it's both exactly what you would expect from Jalal under mind control, and also just exactly the opposite of what you would expect from Jalal. Because of course, if he didn't have any restraints, we know that he likes Erza, so this is not a surprise. But just to see it done in that way, and then to see her reaction, because, well, she reacts in a very Erza manner, again, it's just pure gold in terms of comedy, like, truly. But okay. Let's get back to some serious stuff. And I think I should mention, even though I do talk about it in my Diabolos Guild video, that for the first time, we see one of the Diabolos members going into Dragon Force. And it's pretty scary, honestly. Not just because they're super strong, which we could have guessed was going to happen because that's just how Dragon Force works, but also because they just seem to lose most of their free will. Which I guess makes sense, because they literally eat dragons, so maybe they have a harder time controlling Dragon Force and preventing it from taking over their personality. But it's still weird, because it's not like the other Dragon Slayers that turn into dragons lost their free will. So maybe it's just a question of them getting control over their power. But still, it was very terrifying in terms of what this really means, not just for the people facing them, but for the people using this type of Dragon Force themselves. However, since I don't care about the Diabolos Guild members, at least the remaining ones, Rafe was pretty cool, even if they do turn into savage beasts, doesn't really matter to me, as long as our heroes beat them, who cares? Neberu going into Dragon Force, though, has a second effect, and that is the reveal of Irene still being inside of Wendy's body, both in terms of her consciousness and some magic. Even though it seems like the magic can only be used the one time, at least as far as we know, but she can still help Wendy with both using her own magic, as in Wendy's magic, and some battle strategy, just because she's there. This is also not an unlimited thing. It seems like the more Wendy uses this, the more likely it is that Irene just can't come back to her in this weird spirit consciousness way. But so far it has served its purpose, and it's also fun to see because I actually really liked Irene as a villain. She wasn't my favorite, of course, but I thought she was pretty interesting, and yeah, maybe part of that has to do with the fact that she's Erza's mother, but I mean, yes, okay. It has to do with her being Erza's mother, but also she literally does just reshape the world at one point, and that has to account for something. I think the last thing I want to mention is that Lucy runs into Brandish again. I don't know if it's in volume 6 or if it's volume 7, but she ran into her in the first 3 volumes. And this is interesting because they're both looking for the Aquarius key, which of course will play a role later down in the arc. I'm not going to tell you how, and even I don't know the full extent of it, but I mean, we all could have guessed it once we saw that Brandish was involved. So I think that's worth pointing out. And the last thing I want to talk about is when they start taking on Alderon himself, which is a very interesting battle, as you would expect when you're taking on a dragon that's literally kilometers big. Like, that's not an exaggeration. His body stretches out for kilometers. And the way they do this is that he is kind of divided into 5 separate entities, those being his god seeds. And well, I'm not going to spoil anything for how they actually take on both those entities and Alderon himself in the later volume. I will say that there is one very interesting part of the battle, and that is when Natsu takes on Wolfen, which is, I think, the first god seed that we're introduced to. And this one has the power to kind of read your mind and then manifest himself as whatever you think is the scariest / strongest magic user. And so Natsu just kind of outsmarts him at one point because he's like, oh, well, if he's going to do that, I'm just going to think about Zeref. And then Zeref has his curse, which will just make living things around him die. So he has to basically self-destruct when this happens, because otherwise he's just gonna kill Alderon himself. And I thought it was very fun, because you don't usually think of Natsu as someone who outsmarts his opponent, but he's also not just dumb when it comes to battling. Like, he has some strategy, and even though he may say it in a way that makes it sound like he's just, thinking about the most obvious thing ever, he does have good instincts, and this was a good showcase of that. But I think that's it for my key moments and details section of the video. I don't think I'm missing anything super important, like mentioning the Diablo's Guild in the last review, so that's good. And if I am, I guess I'll make another separate video. No, I mean, all kidding aside, I was going to make a separate video on Diablos anyway, but it was weird that I just kind of forgot about them. Still, in this one, I think I went over everything I wanted to talk about. And I guess this means it's the end. But alright, I hope you enjoyed this. Do let me know what you think of the first 6 volumes, I guess, at this point, of the arc. And if you haven't read them, then let me know what you think of the video. And if you're excited about the anime coming back, I mean, I'm guessing most of you are. And what you're most excited about, I guess, for the anime's return. Regardless, if you want to see more Fairy Tail content, including, of course, the conclusion to this trilogy, I guess, of videos on the first 9 volumes of the 100 Years Quest, then I do recommend subscribing. And I hope to see you all in the next video. But until then, remember to follow the way of the Ace. See ya!